Welcome, everyone. It's Angelo Robles, host of the Angelo Robles podcast and the founder at Family Office Association. I'm sure many of you are wondering that work or want to work in a family office or really even a family foundation or family enterprise, a private entity, an organization run or created or multiple, which is often the case, by a significant family. Yeah, it's great to talk about investing and occasionally crypto and all the cool and exciting things going on. But I think you'll all agree that accounting, aggregation, complexity of multi-entities that many families and enterprises have, you got to get that right, even if you have a de facto family office. So this podcast is really dedicated to everyone that I just described, maybe a little more specific to the CFO, but I think it's going to be valuable from the CEO to a family member to anyone involved or touching any aspect of a significant family. So we're calling it the rather grand title of the best accounting management tech for family offices. Our special guest today is Ben Collins of Sage Intacct. Ben, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Angelo, and I'm very pleased to be joining you today. So we've talked about doing this for a while, so I'm thrilled to make it happen.
Thank you. So am I. Among my larger scale family offices as members of Family Office Association, Sage Intacct is probably among the most broadly used of any tech platform by significant families, especially if they're larger scale, generational, and have multiple entities. And probably the reason that I give, Ben, and let me know if I'm on the right track when I'm talking to families making recommendations, are they able theoretically to do some of this internally with human power on their own? Yes, to some degree, but is it the most effective and efficient utilization of time and resources? Absolutely not. It's the opportunity for the creativity in the CEO, the president, and the CFO to do things that machines can't do yet. That may one day change, but the opportunity to slice and dice data, real-time data, so you can make better decisions, including investing, tax mitigation, and even risk mitigation. I don't know what you're doing if you don't have a proper program and technology in place. So I'm queuing you up pretty well there, but you think I'm right? And how would you expand upon that?
Yeah, Angelo, firstly, I think you nailed it. And it sounds like, it's straight out of something that I wrote recently. Which I think is great. I think you touched on a lot of things there. So just to unpack it a little bit. Yes, in theory, people can get by using legacy systems, right? In theory, you could use Quickbooks, you could use some of the on-premise solutions to get by. But one of the key things that you mentioned on the outset is the multiple entity environment that a lot of family offices operate in. With a lot of legacy systems, that doesn't take long. It's not an exponential thing. It's an additive thing where these entities create an issue of management that really can cause severe headaches, heartburn, all sorts of different maladies, trying to manage those, consolidate those on a monthly basis, right? So it's having to log out, log in to each different instance, consolidate this information, take it out of the resident application into Excel. And trust me, I love Excel. I do all sorts of things in Excel. It drives my wife nuts, the amount of stuff that I do in Excel. I'm a former investment banker, so I know it's powerful. But trying to manipulate all of that data within a spreadsheet that it's cumbersome, right? And I think you really hit the nail on the head when you said that it's about using one's time wisely, right? And does the CFO, does the controller, does anyone on the finance team want to be doing that in that type of consolidation anymore? And the short answer is no. So this ties into a whole host of different themes, in terms of the security of the data, the currency of the data. Once you start exporting it, is it real time? But also just, one of the things that I've heard time and again recently is just the issue of talent retention in a lot of these offices and across the wealth and asset management spectrum, and this goes into private equity. I mean, just you name it, it touches everything, just trying to retain key talent. And if people are doing these mundane tasks day in, day out, they get bored, they get frustrated. They want to be doing more strategic, fun, engaging things, right? And so arming them with the right technology really can go a long way towards hopefully creating a more enriching, fulfilling experience on their end as well. So I don't know if I answered. I think you got a broad question. I probably had a broader answer there, but we can continue to explore it.
No, I mean, those were great points you brought up. Excel can be sometimes difficult to master, and even if as a CFO or executive in a family office, you now have to translate that to a family member that that's not how they're best going to view information, or possibly even an investment professional in terms of making a decision. Is it potentially acceptable? It might be, but is it optimal? I just can't see that being the case. And you really nailed it. A hard part of having a successful family office is not only having the right governance and structures in place. Obviously, most important is going to be the people. And if the people day after day, week after week, it's mundane in terms of what they're doing, and it doesn't really tap into their full potential and looking at it more strategically about how he or she could provide value. That's one of the challenges that family offices have faced really forever, since well before I've been in the business, and I've been in the business a long time. It's recruiting and retaining top talent. Sage Intacct literally deals with among Forbes 50 level and others for sure, but Forbes 50 level family offices. You have tremendous insights into best practices of literally the best of the best, at least from an accounting tech management software perspective and how it interplays in the things that we're talking about. If you're able to, maybe share some best practices that you're seeing in accounting relative to technology management software and how that interplays in the family office world.
Yeah, so good question, Angelo. And yes, we do have some remarkably interesting insights into how people leverage our technology, and also the technology that exists in, I guess I would say, the broader financial management ecosystem, which we are a part of. So we provide best-in-class general ledger accounting software. That said, that's one part of a much broader math problem in terms of trying to figure out what does that integrated platform look like. We have a broader ecosystem of marketplace partners, everything from American Express, Bill.com. So trying to figure out, where are the touch points and integrating those from accounts payable to your general ledger, trying to figure out where you can create points of automation along those different chains. So that's one of the things that we, as a best-in-class provider, really strive to do, is build out that ecosystem of providers that surround, and I'll be selfish here, right? Surround us. But in reality, the GL is a core part of it, really a foundational part of it. But it's this, kind of evolving ecosystem or tech stack, if you will, that needs to be constructed thoughtfully. And with some intent behind it. I was talking to someone recently, and they said, buying technology because you need it today, you're already too late, and that you have an issue that needs to be fixed. And trying to stay ahead of those things is honestly one of the hardest parts for family offices, which don't necessarily have that fully built out IT function. So it's oftentimes incumbent on the users themselves, the CFO, maybe the controller, to have that ability, or be empowered with that, the ability to make technology decisions and invest in technology, but also have that foresight to be able to look a few moves ahead and say, okay, we're starting to see some bottlenecks in this particular process. We need to get ahead of it. We need to evaluate software. In terms of best practices, Angelo, I would say the number one thing that I see, and I'm not going to get into the, debits and credits, and, you deal with some really cool stuff on your show, right? I mean, you've got all sorts of awesome folks talking about crypto and their strategies, and, are we living in a simulation? So I'm not going to get into
you actually listen.
I'm not getting into the weeds of accounting. What I will say, looking at a little bit more holistically, right, is that one of the things that people, I guess, underestimate or struggle with is that they're not used to buying software, right? In family offices, they're pretty lean outfits, and so buying software, maybe they borrow an RFP from someone that they know who works for a larger entity, or maybe they have one from a previous job, but does that really map to what their needs are? And I think, just trying to navigate that process and think about, okay, what are the needs that we have today? What are the needs we have going forward? Trying to think and plan kind of backwards from what that good outcome looks like is hard for people, right? And it's hard for people who aren't in technology every day. And so I think, just having a grounded approach to that and a thoughtful approach to actually procuring your technology is, the number one, silver bullet, if you will, in terms of creating, a technology environment that's going to work for your firm and actually meet your goals. So, that's the biggest piece of advice that I would give to folks is, really put a lot of thought into how that investment is made and who is opining during that process. It's one thing for the CFO to make that decision; absolutely should be part of it, right? But are they the ones day in, day out in the system, in the weeds, entering those journal entries? Who are going to be using it? You need buy-in from those folks. You need their buy-in up front to make sure that implementation goes well. So again, long-winded way of saying that without getting into the nuts and bolts of accounting, one of the things that we really see as one of the key pillars of success for our solution, and really, for most solutions, from a tech standpoint, is really, thinking through what are the needs up front, and then, working from there.
And I mean, and I would say, and nothing really new here, but post-COVID, I mean, what was going to happen has been accelerated. And you are seeing more technology proficient family offices. You're seeing more, at least somewhat remote and virtual, and an opportunity for the right people to have information at their fingertips. And also, suppose it's, the secretive and complex world of an Excel spreadsheet, which is somewhat antiquated compared to what else is out there, and that person gets incapacitated or goes down, especially now when we're at least partially with family members spread apart in the family office. Being technology proficient and having the right security measures in place, for sure, I get it. And we'll get a little bit to that in more cloud and mobile services shortly. But these are really, really important issues. You might be able to be effective not having some of this. I'll give you that. You are going to be wickedly inefficient. And that basically is going to impact your time. And time is money and could be utilized for other resources that could be more valuable to the family. And I think that's gravely underestimated.
I couldn't agree with you more, Angelo. And I think there were a lot of, I guess, silver linings. I don't know if they're silver, bronze linings maybe to this pandemic. And one of the things that it sort of forced a lot of organizations to do is just look at how their business is operating. And I think it really put a lot of those inefficiencies under the microscope and forced, I think this remote work environment really forced people to look at where their digital investment has been made, because any gaps therein were surfaced pretty quickly over the past, what are we, 18 months, 19, I've lost count at this point, but it's one of those things where it really, if there were gaps in that digital strategy and their data strategy, those were exposed pretty early on, and they needed to be remedied. I think for the most part, though, I think most companies, especially in the financial services space, family offices in particular, did a pretty good job of doing that. And they recognized, what are going to be the needs that we have working remotely, communicating with our family members, holding sessions, in a remote fashion, and being able to create, this collaborative environment that we need. So I think people understood that need pretty early on, and were able to address some of it. Is everything, across the board fixed? Absolutely not. But I think there is at least that knowledge that's shared by a lot of people in a lot of family offices, Angelo, that digital investments are no longer, luxury items, and they're not nice to haves, they're need to have. So a lot of it is really table stakes. If they're looking to take their business to the next level, investing in technology is the way to get them there. And I think that a lot of the the executive teams, working within these organizations understand that. Getting the buy-in from the families can sometimes be a little challenging, right? In certain families, there's different dynamics. Certain families embrace it. Certain families are leading the charge and really forcing the office to adopt a more digitalized experience. But it goes both ways. So we've seen that change agent sit on both sides of it. But I think by and large there is someone though that recognizes that investments need to be made and continue to be made, right? We can't just rest on our laurels. Okay, great. Now we've got this accounting software that's no longer on premise, it's in the cloud. That's great, but can we integrate it with other things? And how easy is it for us to integrate with other applications? And can we save time by doing that? So I think it's, trying to look at those things holistically, which I think people, by and large are getting better at doing.
I mean, a couple of things pop to mind as you're talking. Driven by potentially younger employees in the family office, but maybe more importantly by the generations upcoming or younger entrepreneurs that are becoming very wealthy in tech, in crypto, in VC, that by nature are probably going to want to be more fluid in their technology and utilization of it. So they're effectively demanding it. And this is going to be an easier platform to learn than all the nuances of Excel, and going to be better and more valuable and more powerful, if that's the right word for a family. Maybe talk a little bit about even just the internal team that a public company, you all realize that Sage Intacct is a public company. They're a deep company with lots of resources. Can you imagine a family looking to build this and maintain this internally? It'll become outdated and too laborious and expensive within a year or years. And now the people are going to want, again, remote. They're going to want mobile access. They're going to want security features. They want to have the resources of a public company behind it. Talk about all of that and how that should really come into the decision-making process for a family office.
Yeah, Angelo, I feel like you should come with me, whenever I do events, because you're touching on so many awesome topics here and different directions we could take this. But you're absolutely right. So Sage, so Intacct is part of Sage, which is a large publicly held UK-based company. We do have a commitment to innovation, and we actually just had our meetings, full week of meetings last week in San Jose, California, to talk about our roadmap and where we're going to make investments, in our different verticals. Financial services being our fastest growing vertical within Intacct. So really exciting opportunities for us to invest in the product. But if I were a family office, I'd probably want us to be doing the building versus maybe someone internal to the firm. And that's meant as no disrespect, as someone who's, sat on both sides of this, it's something where, that build versus buy decision, building it, again, in the early days, applying some of those Band-Aids, it can work, you can get by. But is it a long-term solution to a problem? Probably not. And is that going to be exposed, and are more things going to have to be cobbled together? That's where, if you've heard the word technical debt or tech debt, that's where that starts. And once you start accumulating tech debt, just like any debt, right? I mean, it's hard. It starts accumulating and building on itself, and it's hard to resolve and get rid of once it gets to this critical mass. And so, one of the things to understand is that when you're trying to build something, if you have that internal expertise and you come from you're coming from some of these, tech startups, and that's how your family office was formed, then maybe you do have those capabilities. Maybe your network does have the ability to create an ecosystem of tech solutions to help you out. Odds are, though, that the amount of people who can get away with that is a very small slice of the overall universe that we're talking about here, Angelo. And better to outsource, right? I mean, this is what we specialize in. We focus on it. We focus on the security. We focus on the compliance, and we focus on the usability. We know that making it easy to use, or as easy as possible to use, is paramount to adoption. And so, all of those things are things that we talk about day in, day out here at Sage Intacct, right? Is not just having this robust set of tools, and it's really robust. I mean, you can, in our product demos, I've almost been here a year, but I mean, every single product demo I sit on, Angelo, when we're talking to prospects, I learn something new, at least one new thing. And it's really cool, the depth that we can go into, but at the core of it too, you have to balance that and walk that fine line between making it really usable and user friendly. And so, we've got users who are super sophisticated family offices who are doing things and pushing the envelope really of what we're capable of, and we're working together with them to push that envelope. And then there are others, and this is the majority, who are just they're on that crawl part of the crawl, walk, run journey. And we take each silo of that crawl, walk, run very seriously and understand there are different needs, different constituents. And so want to make sure that we've got a software that meets the needs of folks who are just transitioning to cloud accounting software, and of those who have been on us for years. You mentioned the hit by the bus scenario. That's happened. It's fun. I met someone fairly recently where one of the key people within their family office actually suffered an accident, wasn't hit by a bus, but had a pretty severe debilitating accident where, if they had used spreadsheets and used that cobbled together model that we kind of, we joke around about, it would have been a pretty severe impediment to just ongoing operations. The family office might not have been a going concern. That said, they had everything on Sage Intacct. They were able to seamlessly plug in, and we assisted with this, someone to pick up the pieces while they were recovering, and thankfully they made a successful recovery. But it's one of those things where that happens, right? We sort of joke about it, but it's one of those things where maybe they just leave and take another position, right? Which happens all the time. Are you prepared for that? Do you have a system that has the information that still resident, that's someone can come in, pick up the pieces, and not have to learn some bespoke solution, right? People know how to use Sage Intacct, so a lot of times it's not necessarily reinventing the wheel in that respect. So one of those things where it's we kind of joke around about some of these things, but it also sometimes happens, which is unfortunate, but that's the world we live in.
And I have a couple of more questions for Ben that I promise we'll get to, kind of like a bit of a mini demo. And again, very mini. So this is just really a light peek in. We're going to get to that shortly. I'd like to go back a little bit to security issues. So again, being a public company, having tremendous internal resources and having the money to have those internal people, and constantly updating what you guys are doing in the cloud, the diversity of it, the security of it. There's some families that I still come across, well, we have our own servers. They're probably not up to date. They're probably not the most efficient way to do it. I understand, Angelo, but I feel like it's ultra secure. And I'm like, your feelings are probably very misguided. One, your servers could be attacked really at any time. And because you're not necessarily a multi-billion-dollar family office with deep internal tech resources, I would say I could go on the dark web and find any decent hacker and probably hack into all of your stuff. And if you're that prominent, then you may have nation states and iconic hackers going after you. You're not going to be able to withstand that. You're really being misled that what you're doing is more secure. 99.9% sure it's not. There might be a way to do that right, but that would require tremendous resources and probably structuring certain servers offshore in Switzerland. And I've advised a couple of families on some deep tech work like that, but that's going to apply to like 1%. It's a very, very small number. The vast, vast majority of them, they are kidding themselves doing this internally. They're at more of a security breach by far than if they were to have the right services of a company. And I'm not saying Sage Intacct is the only one, but I probably am going to say they're the best one.
Well, thank you for that, Angelo. Yeah, it's one of those things where security is it's certainly top of mind, within the family office community, right? There are some high profile people who occupy and have family offices. That's just the nature of it, which in turn creates more potential for a security breach, whether it's whether there's malice behind it, or sometimes a lot of it is just sometimes inadvertent, right? Because I think
Sure.
security, I don't know how many times, I mean, you can create the most secure environment, but it's most of the breaches really, Angela, they're people driven, right? They're process driven. So it's not necessarily the server's fault, right? It's someone, and it's often not even bad actors. It's just people making mistakes and emailing things that maybe shouldn't be emailed, things like that. And so it's almost, as important just to have that governance in place, that training in place to make sure your people are doing the right things. We treat, security with the utmost importance. And if you want to get really boring, we've got all sorts of different acronyms in terms of our SOC 2 compliance, the amount of penetration testing.
Familiar with it.
Yeah, and we can really go into, we can go down a rabbit hole there in terms of the amount of investment we've made in ensuring that we've got, fully redundant 24/7 servers. I mean, it's really pretty impressive, actually, the amount that we've invested there. Like you said, it's something where we've put a lot of resources there. Not to say that families with expert level advice, like I'm sure you're giving, is they can construct something. But I think it also in parallel, you just need the people and the processes in place to make sure that whatever you're leveraging is leveraged properly, right? And so there's so many different ways and creative ways people can get access and try and get access to this, and a lot of it is not the server's fault, like I said before, or something to do with the actual hardware. There's also that human element that goes along with it, and that's something that probably needs as much attention as the hardware and all of the different investments that are made on that side of the house.
Before we get to a demonstration, I used a word early in the conversation, and then you used it after, and that's effectively multi-entity accounting. And I realized, although it's probably self-explanatory, multi-entity, we may have went down a little bit of an accounting jargon rabbit hole. So I just want to get a little bit of clarity on that. I think if you're a family of significant resources, especially one that owns businesses, so you own businesses, you probably invest in companies and businesses often that are private. You have varying trust, generational trust, dynastic, LLCs, corporations, onshore, offshore, foundations. You have investment center trust on various assets. So by and I'm probably leaving some out, by
the real estate piece, the real estate.
Oh my God. Yeah. Like real estate, like you may have one or two, you may have 100 or more.
Yeah.
So, I mean, really, you're going to keep track of that, an old fashioned Excel spreadsheet? You're kidding me, especially if you have dozens, let alone potentially into the hundreds. I could already tell you when you really add it up with tax ID numbers and all that, you probably already have more than you think you do. It's overwhelming sometimes to your internal or external staff. And that's what we go back to, being effective and efficient. And are you most optimized for that now? I'm going to go with, you probably need an evaluation, because you're probably not.
Yeah. And thank you for rewinding and level setting a little bit there, Angelo. And you're right, tax IDs, a unique tax ID, probably the best way to differentiate. That's going to be a new entity for the most part. But yeah, I mean, I think and you rattled off an impressive list there, and yeah, we could probably expand on that for a while, right? I mean, just in terms of the different geographies, regions where folks are invested. So it's definitely something where people may not be aware of some of the inefficiencies that lay behind, or that are behind having so many different entities. And it's not a bad thing, right? It's and I don't want to paint it out to be a bad thing. It can just be a problem when you're trying to manage the finances and generate a consolidated view of all of these different entities when you're using legacy systems, because they're really not designed to support that, right? My wife uses Quickbooks. It's great for her small business, right? One entity. And so it's a fine platform for that. But when you get into the complexities of managing the finances of these dynastic family offices, that's where you need, something that's really purpose built. And that's where Sage Intacct comes into the equation.
I mean, I could think of one family that I think ended up becoming a Sage Intacct family. They owned, I believe it was a professional hockey team in the NHL,
Yeah.
including the property. And off the top of your head, you're like, okay, maybe they have one entity that owns the hockey team, one that owns the facility. And they were like, no, like we have an event management company, we
Right.
rent out for
Merchandising.
concerts.
Yeah.
We have like 30 different tax IDs. It's complex. Part of it's due to compliance and protecting ourselves from certain mitigating risk and lawsuits and all that. But it wasn't just one or two entities.
Yeah, and that's it's interesting. Now you're speaking my language. I have two kids who are hockey players. We're big fans, but I'll be at a practice at a rink tonight. But it's interesting, Angela, because I think you're right. There is just that. You just don't realize, right, sometimes what's behind some of these things. And so that's where asking good questions, having good communication with the practitioners and folks within the family office, I think it's that two-way street where in order to retain key talent, the family needs to be engaged in dialogue. Hey, how can we better support you? How can we equip you to stop doing the mundane, data processing, data standardization stuff in Excel, right? But I also think it's incumbent on the family office practitioners, if there is a need, and there's, this is a small, it's a community, right? And people talk, and if they hear of best practices, if they hear of ways to better streamline their own workflows based on what they've heard from others, that's a chance for them to go to the families themselves and say, hey, listen, I know we're doing it this way, but I think there's a better way, and here's why, and make a case for it. I think it's something where do you have to build out that business case, like you're taught in business school? Not necessarily, but I think, pointing to, here's how we're doing it today, and here's how we could be doing it in the future, and here's the time savings. And like you said, time is money. Here's how much we'd be saving. That matters, and that's going to strike a nerve regardless of who you're talking to.
Okay, Ben, I think it's a little bit of showtime, show and tell. Let's see a bit of a demonstration.
You mentioned demo a few times here, so I don't have.
Yeah, maybe that's a little too strong of a word. Yeah, how about some screenshots?
Yeah, and even then, like how about we just? I've got a presentation, and we can talk.
Probably even better.
So let me pop this open, and it's funny because talking about accounting software, and I was making that joke, maybe slightly less exciting than some of the normal topics that you delve into here. And then also, sharing a PowerPoint on top of that, I think I'm doubling down in terms of my wonkishness. And but before I go on here, Angela, I just want to make sure that you can see this.
It looks perfect.
All right, excellent. So, so this is derived actually from some research that we conducted, and we're always, on the forefront of engaging with, thought leaders, and trying to put forth, points of view in terms of, where the market is headed. And so, one of the things that we researched, and this is actually at the start of the pandemic, and so, some of the key takeaways that I just want to highlight here, is just that, being a CFO within a family office right now is hard, right? Probably harder than it's ever been, right? There's this just dramatic pace of change. We see this chart here that I'm hovering over, Angela, around 98% of CFOs say their job has changed. I want to talk to the 2% who say it hasn't. I want to know what they're doing, and figure out. And you know what? I bet, fast forward, 12 months to when, we originally conducted this research, I bet we're close to that 100%. So I think those 2% are now converts, or maybe they're just hardcore contrarians. Who knows? But it's tricky, right? You just have all sorts of new functions rolling up to the finance team, like we talked about earlier. A lot of financial decision makers are driving and empowered with driving that digital transformation. So it's no longer that IT team that's seen as the leader or the tip of the spear when it comes to digital transformation. A lot of that investment is really falling on the CFO, and not just to write the check at the end of the day, right? But to take part in that broader evaluation, and is it going to add value to the overall business as a whole? So hard time to be a CFO is I guess the key takeaway here, which if there are any CFOs listening, I'm sure doesn't come as news to them. Now, in terms of the historical role of the CFO, we've got this CFO 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 infographic. I think we've, for the most part, in most family offices that we've spoken to, that's the rear view mirror approach, to use the driving analogy. So that's the historian, people looking at the CFO kind of in that almost 1950s lens, but it's really, far more recent than that. It just feels more antiquated, I guess. But I think most businesses right now, most family offices are in that CFO 2.0, where they can add in that analytical. There's tools that help them do that. It's no longer just this historical viewpoint. They're getting into the why things are happening and really trying to drive strategic insights based on that information. But then there's this leap, and I think we're sort of at the cusp of it. And I think this is going to be driven by some of the AI and machine learning tools that are, starting to be embraced at a mainstream level. And this is really around, using the car analogy again, what's around the corner. It's using predictive analytics to really guide decision making. We talked about decision making early on and using data, data-driven decision making. If I had a nickel for every time I've either said that or heard that or written that, Angela, I'd probably have $1. But it's something that really is something that people are striving for, and I think people understand is kind of the goal or the next step. But I think we're just not quite there yet. We're starting to integrate and invest in and roll out artificial intelligence into our own product, but I think there's still some rationalization there that needs to take place before we fully get to that CFO 3.0. But curious as to your reaction based on that last slide and this slide that I'm showing. Does this sort of echo with or dovetail with what you're hearing, what you're seeing?
No doubt about it. And we discussed a little bit earlier being the visionary from even the CFO or the CEO side, and I think your screen, that little part towards the bottom right where it says visionary, really, really nails it. A new breed of trailblazing finance leaders. Instead of just using their rear view mirror, they're using new technology and predictive analytics that is so incredibly accurate. And that's how even the role inside family offices and enterprises is changing. So yeah, I completely concur.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because the AI and ML, it's one of those things where I feel like, and I'm curious if this aligns with what you've seen, Angelo. People are in sort of two camps where they're almost like they want it now, and they almost want to skip some of the foundational stuff, right? They might still be using Excel, and they're thinking, okay, we gotta get our arms around AI and how it can streamline some of our workflows, whereas there's probably some foundational investments that they need to make first, and there's that crawl walk run approach, and then there's just stalwarts who just don't trust it and are just having and this is something where it's I get it, but people just they often are saying to me, I still want people to oversee it. I still want people to touch it. And I think that's where there's maybe some misunderstanding around AI, and that a lot of the AI that we're rolling out, or all the AI that we're incorporating and rolling out, is designed to be complementary, not supplementary, and not necessarily take people out of the equation. It's really just to try and save some time. There's still going to be that human element, that human oversight to it, right? It's just trying to speed things up a bit. Does that align with what you've seen and heard?
For sure. I mean, really, the biggest challenge that you all have is not the small number of competitors that are out there. It basically is inertia. We've been doing things a certain way, and I get it. It's hard to change. I think once we probably get by our college years, we become a little bit entrenched into kind of what's kind of working, and we get a little bit anchored, and it's difficult to change. But I mean, look at how much, like you said, even the last 5 or 10 years, and what's happening in the world of AI and the advancements of so many different things that we talk about in my podcast. You have to really, really fight that. You absolutely need to adapt to what's going on. Again, I constantly go back to Peter Drucker. How do I become more effective first, then more efficient, more effective and more efficient? And the honest answer is many family offices have a long way to go. There's a reason why in benchmarking, most are going to be kind of towards the middle. They're not the worst, but they're certainly not the best.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that aligns with, my previous comment, Angelo, where, looking at this slide, I'd say the majority are in that CFO 2.0, right? And I think that's not necessarily that's not a bad place to be, but I think it's also, trying to figure out, what's the path that they need to take to get to that predictive 3.0. And hopefully that's something that they are thinking about. The vast majority of the CFOs that I interact with are, and they've got some really cool creative ideas in terms of how to get there. So,
well, I think I have a question for you, Ben. So okay, you guys come in, you meet with the family office. It could be, customized, or what level of services with Sage Intacct are going to be best. But now it needs to be onboarded. There needs to be some level of hands-on training, and there needs to be probably a consultant that has some level of access with, at minimum, the CFO to, are we maximizing the program? Because the odds are after 30 days, I'm going to go with the answer is I would really doubt you are maximizing it. So how often do you have to go on Zooms or in person and come back? And how is that tweaked to maybe strive to get to that CFO 3.0?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, Angelo. So it's and you know what, our average implementation is actually longer than 30 days. And so, it's something where, implementation, you need to factor that in to the just the calculus that you're doing in any tech investment. And implementation is, takes time, right? There's that data migration, but there's also how to use it, how to harness it. What are the integrations and linkage points, to hopefully, build this ecosystem that's all communicating together. That really should be one of the goals. So, it's almost, I don't want to say it's a lifelong thing. That's a little too grandiose, but we recently had our user conference, Angelo, and which was in Las Vegas. It was a hybrid event, really cool to be back, in front of people, really solid attendance. One of the things that was really interesting, I moderated a family office focused panel there, was, just some of the discussion around some of the, not even, this is beyond the 101 and 202. These are like the graduate level class, Sage Intacct use cases that were posed during this panel. And we actually had to table a bunch of them just because they were kind of almost edge cases. But it's something where, one of the points, the people who were engaging in these dialogues, they knew that there was a way to unlock some more potential from the platform. And they were just looking for peers to try and figure out how to do that. And so that's where Transform, and we've got a community that we also, broker these types of introductions, just talking to folks, trying to understand how they're using it. And again, these are conversations that we facilitate all the time. I was just on the call yesterday with someone trying to arrange a peer-to-peer dialogue. That's one of the most powerful ways that we've seen people try and harness and get the full power out of our solution, Angelo, is really just by listening, learning, and asking. And sometimes it's this collaborative thing where these two family offices that have never met both have that same goal in mind, and we all sort of work together to solve for it, which is really cool.
Yeah, you mentioned the conference that you guys host back. I don't know how, but I was invited to speak at one back in Vegas, like you said.
You're on my list for next year, Angelo. So.
I love Vegas. I'm in. I remember I went and spoke in 2019. I guess it was October of 2019. Not only did I have a great time, but it's Vegas. How could I not? But the quality of people that are CFOs and family businesses, enterprises, and family offices. And in my session, there was multiple sessions going on. Who cares about my session? I still had over 100 people, and the quality was probably about as high level of a CFO of any organization or family office gathering that I've ever went to. It was really a great experience. I really enjoyed it. And yes, I'm angling for my ticket for next year.
And it's funny because I'm, in all sincerity, we're doing that, Angela. Next year, I hate to break it to you. Hopefully you enjoy Orlando a little bit, because we're
Oh, sure. I love Orlando.
All right. So yeah, we'll see you in Orlando. One of the things that's interesting is that, yeah, we've got this massive user conference. We've got partners. It's thousands of people attending. But the demand this year for more family office focused content was through the roof. The session that you referenced, having a great time and was like oversubscribed. I think it was standing room only. I wasn't with Sage Intacct at the time, but it still gets talked about, Angela. So we're absolutely going to have, more of a presence next year, at our user conference to hopefully facilitate conversations, whether you're prospect, just evaluating solutions, whether you're at that 101 and just implementing and feel like you're maybe just scratching the surface and want to, understand, where to go next, because we have all sorts of different modules too, Angela. So it is sort of that modular approach that we encourage people to take, where, buying them all and trying to implement them all from the get-go, probably not going to work for most family offices. So it's trying to be smart and pragmatic about what's rolled out and what's maybe something that you tackle 6 months down the road. That could be our Sage Intacct planning module, formerly budgeting and planning. So that's something where we just encourage our clients to be thoughtful about that they're not biting off more than they can chew there.
Of course, very important question on Orlando 2022. Do you know where it's going to be held? I do have my favorite place in Orlando, where I've been to multiple times.
Where's that, Angelo?
My favorite is the Grand Floridian.
Okay. I feel like,
but there's multiple great spots. Orlando's a wonderful area to hold a conference.
If I have a vote, I will certainly lobby for it. Unfortunately, when it comes to the planning and logistics, I'm more on the they'll throw me on stage and hand me a microphone, and hopefully I don't embarrass myself. I don't
think that's a problem.
Yeah, for those that are listening, for those that can join us in Orlando, that'd be awesome. But we also do a lot of these type of events too. It's great to connect with you directly. Just have these, I guess, more casual conversations. These are really fun for us to do. We are very embedded within this family office community. It's one that I knew a little bit about before joining Sage Intacct, but not to the depth that I know now. And it's just a fascinating industry, and always fun to talk shop with folks like yourself.
No, it's been fantastic. I don't want to certainly rush you, and I think the slides that you showed were helpful in visualizing and really explaining it. We have a little bit more time left. If you had any other slides you wanted to show.
I do. And it's funny, I've got a bunch of slides. I don't want to, go through each one and read the bullet points. One of my pet peeves, right? And not sure if you can.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah, but key takeaway here is that there is this rapidly changing set of expectations on the family member front. Just trying to manage that generational change, something that we talked about. So I think we sort of touched on most of these things here, Angelo, but governance, defining roles, and really trying to figure out where in these different generations are people interested in being involved? What sort of insight do they want into the financial performance? One of the cool things about Sage Intacct is you can create this partition view, and you can designate who has access and who has visibility into what. So if it's a certain branch of a family, if it's a certain person within the family office, and you want to construct a way just to limit what they can see, and that's usually the case, right? Not many people need that holistic access. That's going to be the senior folks within the family office, maybe the senior folks within the families themselves. But you can create just this much more meaningful environment and viewpoint for people to consume the information that really matters to them, right? And create sort of that curated environment. So, and again, like you talked about earlier, the new communication channels, it's no longer just, folks who are, these 60-year-old males who are running these things. It's a new generation. There's a lot more diversity. And I think with that, there's a lot more demand for tech-enabled solutions, and people, want to look at their phone and see, what is the, I'm holding up my phone here. My background's blurring it out, but, people want to, are remote and want to view things, on the go. And so supporting that type of environment, supporting those types of communication channels is important. Data-driven approach is funny because I think we've talked to most of these things already, in some way, shape, or form, which I think is great. But I think it's really, people understand that they need to have that data-driven approach to the finance function. But I think it's also just, how to go about doing that, right? And having that data strategy. I don't know if you hear about, data strategy, and I use that in quotes a little bit, but that's a big one these days. And that's really just trying to think about, I think it's, one of those terms that can get a little, maybe convoluted, but really just, where are the sources of this data? What types of data are you trying to make sense of? Where is it housed? Who can access it? So, grounding it in some pretty basic, I'm not a overly smart guy, Angela, but trying to ground it in some of these basic questions, really helps. What are you trying to get out of that data? A couple of things, just to touch on, is, the Excel spreadsheet. It's something where, again, we know people are never going to remove Excel from their day-to-day lives. We get it, but should it be used for as many things as people are leaning on it to support internally? Probably not. And I think you did a good job describing that earlier around some of the inefficiencies that result. And, is that something where their efforts and resources could be deployed on more high value tasks? And that's usually the case. And that's something that we hear directly is, hey, we know we could be doing stuff that's more valuable to the family. Help us do that. Right. So, just some tactical steps. I think, a lot of these are ones that we've talked about, just having that pragmatic approach, involving the right people. Getting buy-in from the right people really is critical. I think that's one of the things where, if it's all senior folks who are sitting on a demo, you're probably, remiss in the invite. And it probably should have a wider scope to it because, you want people, across the organization to understand, why you're making the change and that it's not an indictment on them. And then if they hear the words artificial intelligence, they're not worried about their job security, right? It's really just, in essence, hopefully to help them, right? And so those investments, really shouldn't be viewed as a threat. Here's a quick snapshot. I guess, this will have to suffice and pass for the demo today. But if anyone does want to check out, we do have, I think it's daily or weekly coffee break demos. They're 30 minutes in length. I'd be happy to point you to one. Really just, high level, just to get a glimpse into what Sage Intacct can offer. One of the main things that we do offer is this customized visibility and transparency through our dashboards. And so this is all, real-time information, role-based, like I mentioned before, so you can see that I'm hovering over. These are different roles that you can select and really get this nice roll-up view, clean, consolidated, real-time information. And this can go across asset classes. So if you're looking across family members, across entities, so if you're looking to consolidate that, something that we can absolutely help with. And, in terms of, constructing this, we've got templates, we've got recommendations. We work with a lot of different family offices, like you mentioned. But we also know that, there's the adage, if you met one family office, you met one family office, and that they're all unique. And so we get that too. And that, there's going to be some tailoring that needs to take place in order to make it work, which we get. And we work with the families to make sure that, they're successful, that they adopt our technology and hopefully get a lot of value out of it.
Well, Ben, this has been fantastic. Even I have had or known Sage Intacct for many years, and I learned some new things and initiatives and how things are evolving. We do have live participants that want to know, is there like a link to the demo? What I may recommend is if you could go into the Zoom chat feature and at minimum type in your name and email, so live participants could directly reach out to you. And, I'm sure you're happy to accommodate where you can any requests that they have. While you're doing that, I'll do a little bit of a close, and then we'll come back and I will ask Jeff, those of you that are interested in reaching out, how could they learn more about Sage Intacct? But if you found the right area in Zoom to type in at minimum your name and email. Oh,
Yeah.
oh, you did. You did.
Yeah, I did. And so hopefully you see that. And then I can, what I can do here, Angelo, and try and find the link real time. If not, I can do it after the fact. But we do have these what are called coffee break demos, and they're really, we know that
Sure.
people are short on time. We get it. We try and make my content. I don't write white papers anymore. I never liked writing them in the first place.
Like no one reads them anymore. That's why. I know.
Exactly. People are podcasting and doing all sorts of much more fun, engaging, cool stuff. So we get it. So these coffee break demos are just quick, high level. Hopefully you don't have to we're not going to pitch you anything on the call. It's a pre-recorded thing, so there's no pressure either. So I can post a link to that, Jeff, and happy to point you in that direction. Also, our website, it is there's a bunch of financial services focused material, family office focused material, that sits on our website. But there's a lot of stuff that we only have room for so many things. So if there's something that if you're looking for or want to talk to one of us, feel free to reach out and I can point you in the right direction.
Of course. And for those that may be watching or viewing in that don't have access to or not live, don't have access to the chat feature, if you could relay your contact info, whether it be website and your personal email, that would be great. Or email at Sage, of course.
Yeah. So the couple ways to contact me. So, again, my name is Ben Collins, and I'm Senior Director of Financial Services industry marketing here. And my email address is ben.collins, COLLINS @sage.com. You can also find more about Sage Intacct through our website, which is sageintacct.com. And I can plug in the URL there. The only thing about Intacct, it's INTACCT, so short for Internet Accounting, for those that are curious how software companies are named. Sometimes it's as simple as shortening two very basic words. So a little branding exercise right there. So yeah, our website, sageintacct.com, has a lot of different avenues to learn more, including links to those coffee break demos, which I mentioned earlier, Angela.
Sure. And again, I'll read it again. That's Ben .collins @sage.com, Sage, SAGE. I highly recommend reaching out to Ben, note to Ben via email or however you reach him, from whatever, Angelo's podcast or Family Office Association. I have multiple members that utilize Sage Intacct. I never know anyone who walks away disappointed. If anything, it opens their eyes to like, wow, like we should have been doing this a long time ago. So definitely from my perspective, I know many of you are used to me talking more on investing and in crypto and global wealth preservation and all things I do have a deep passion for. But you got to get down the technology and the processes. Those are very important to having an effective, going off the title of my book from a couple of years ago, effective family office. And I wish I knew now what I knew then when I wrote that in 2017, because it definitely needs a rewrite. But some of the foundational things I talk about from people and leadership and governance are, honestly, they're rather timeless. Even 100 years from now, I think much of it will still be relevant. But boy, have I changed on the investing side. what 4 to 5 short years could do. Well, and great. For the live participants, I see you did put the link in. Ben, did you have any final comments, or we'll do a close?
No, I guess final comments for me, Angela. Firstly, thank you so much for having me on. This was really a lot of fun, and again, hopefully, I know you've got, some exciting guests talking about some really exciting things on this podcast. Hopefully, talking about financial accounting software wasn't taking things down too much.
About as exciting as we could. I really
as exciting as we could.
I was naturally curious and learned a lot myself.
Yeah, no, that was great. And so it was a lot of fun, just talking shop with you, Angelo, as always. We're gonna absolutely make Orlando happen at our next user conference. But in the meantime, I definitely, look forward to engaging in future dialogues like this with you, with anyone who's listening today and wants to learn more. So again, just really appreciate it. This has been really fun.
Thank you so much, Ben. Everyone, I'm Angelo Robles, host of the Angelo Robles podcast. We're a family office on YouTube, and we're familyofficeassociation.com. Learn about membership. I think you'll find there's tremendous value to family foundations, family offices, private investors, and those with family enterprises. Hopefully, our master classes, our research content, our digital, and our in-person events. And we are absolutely back. I was a whole week at Art Basel, Miami, hosting about 7 events over 4 to 5 days. And we have a very active agenda upcoming at minimum, because we're booked out 3 to 4 months in advance, effectively over the first quarter. So go to our website, learn more, reach out to me, check us out on social media. I'm really active across all platforms. You'll find it mainly YouTube, simply as Family Office. Go and subscribe. It's free. And on that note, Ben, it's been a great pleasure. I wish you the best of a holiday season. Go hockey, and look forward to the next time.
Thanks so much. Bye now.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.